Each Sunday in October, I will be sharing parts of a conversation I had with Jenn Marlon, a research scientist at the Yale Program on Climate Communication. She uses a range of methods like surveys, experiments, and modeling to better understand public perceptions of and responses to environmental change, particularly relating to climate and extreme weather events. To begin, we start with just that, perception. What does the latest research show in terms of Americans' thoughts on climate change?
So Americans are changing their minds about climate change, in fact, because we used to think it wasn't really that serious, or maybe it was going to happen in the year 2100 or decades into the future. Now we're starting to see that actually just warming a couple degrees actually translates into more heat waves, hotter high temperatures during the summer. It turns out that that's going to double the area burned in the West. And so people are becoming more worried and more concerned. But when it comes to opinions about what we should do about it, we're finding that Democrats are more in support of aggressive policy, especially at the government level, whereas Republicans still aren't really on board with policies to address it. And so I think many Republicans still don't see it as a serious risk, whereas Democrats do tend to see it as a more serious risk. So it's a very polarized issue, as we all know.
And your research that Yale does actually can get as local as a state or a county. So what can you tell us about how Central Missourians are feeling about climate change and if that's changed over time?
Missouri is a bit more conservative than New York or California or these states on either coast. But we do find that a strong majority of Missourians are convinced that climate change is happening. And that it is a serious risk that is going to cause harm to future generations, certainly to other plants and animals, that it's going to harm people in the United States. And we find that people in Missouri and Central Missouri, by and large, want citizens to do more to address this problem. They want corporations to do more to address this problem. And so there is general support. And in line with all the other states in the country, Missourians want more renewable energy. And we see that everywhere. And I think people are really starting to understand that the market forces alone are pushing this transition now, because the cost of solar and wind is so cheap compared to coal, oil, and gas. So the market is now driving us in the right direction, luckily, but we need to move faster.
And while Yale's research is about Americans' opinions, I think it's important that as scientists, we also state, is climate change an opinion?
Climate change is not an opinion. The climate is, in fact, changing. And we have, believe it or not, we have over 25,000 different pieces of evidence, indicators of how that climate is changing. And it is not just a natural cycle. This is not being driven by the sun or volcanoes. We have tested all of those other possible explanations. And we can even see the fingerprint of fossil fuels in our atmosphere by looking at the molecules in our atmosphere and in our trees now, which absorb our air. And so we can see very clearly that this is due to burning fossil fuels, the problem of this excess warming, these heat trapping gases that we're putting into the air is due to human activities. And there's 97% of scientists have looked at that evidence and been convinced that this is human activities. And so the good news is that we can change our human activities and address the problem.
And there are solutions. And if we start now and work at a fairly aggressive pace, we can eventually slow our rapidly changing climate. Each Sunday this month of October, I will be sharing solutions as I continue my conversation with Jenn. We will discuss what we can do as individuals and what needs to happen on the international level. It all matters. It is all connected. For more, visit KUMU.com/climate.